There we go.
All right, let me just get that off my screen and we'll get started. Okay.
July 16th, to turn it by to Governor Baker signed into law an act relative to extending certain state of emergency accommodations, which among other things extends the expiration of the provisions pertaining to the open meeting law to March 31st, 2023. Specifically, this extension allows public bodies to continue holding meetings remotely without a quorum of the public body physically present at the meeting location and to provide adequate alternative access to remote meetings. That does not make any new changes to open meeting law other than extending the expiration of the temporary provisions regarding remote meetings.
Okay. Public participation guidelines. Members of the public wishing to participate in the meeting must use their full name for Zoom access. If full names are not used, people will not be allowed to participate in the discussion. The town reserves the right to remove any member of the public from the meeting who does not use full name or acts inappropriately. As a preliminary matter, this is Athlyn Sweeney, the chair. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Veronica? Here. Amanda? Here. Sue? Here. Tara? Here. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Jericho?
In attendance.
Very good. Anticipated speakers on the agenda. We have Jason Graziadei. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Very good. Thank you. Good afternoon. This open meeting of the CHS is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. Is that correct? I want to make sure. Okay. For this meeting, CHS is convening by video conference via Zoom app, as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to share your screen. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I, the chair, know otherwise. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, please permit me to cover the ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I, the chair, will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each to speak by name. Provide any comments, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or your computer when you are asked not to speak. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. After members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. Finally, each vote is taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. Okay. And so we have Jason Graziadei here from The Current, and we have put you first on the agenda, Jason. So Jericho, I think that you and Jason maybe came up with a way that you were gonna do the introduction, so I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Yeah, so basically, I just wanted to, I'm playing kind of the moderator role here to whatever degree that's necessary. And I know that there's been, this was a question that came up originally with Council on Human Services over a year ago, I think. And we've been working on ways to try and, kind of get a good grasp on the history and context in which the court reporting is being done. I know that there's been a lot of discussion about it on and off over the years, just from my time, basically high school on. It's been a thing that people have discussed about in one way or the other. And I know that there's been some discussion of it in the past, though I don't remember the specifics of it well enough. So I did sort of want to see if we could have a little round table type discussion here, where we can kind of figure out how we're in this particular method of communicating, how we what discussion takes place beyond, and kind of get the media eye view of what's happening with the court report and so on and so forth. And there's nobody better to do that than Jason. So I figured we had a couple of general questions that we were throwing around during our discussion. I don't think we need to directly, do a Q&A on those. Jason, if you just want to run us through sort of the history of reporting on court and criminal information here on Nantucket, as you understand it, that's probably the best place to go there, I believe.
Sure. I mean, I don't really know like the long, version of that history. I know how, having worked at the Enquirer Mirror, I know how the Enquirer Mirror covers, the courthouse, and did it for a number of years there. And since starting the Current, how we do it there, which is slightly different. But typically, I think what's been done is, at least in the newspaper, is like trying to cover every single criminal case that goes through the courthouse, and naming what the charges are, who the suspect are, what some of the circumstances are of some of the cases that are more significant and more involved, and trying to follow those cases through to the conclusion and resolution, and reporting on how the court system sort of handles all the different charges that come through. So I mean, that's how the Enquirer Mirror, I think, does it, but they can speak for themselves if they want. I'm kind of in a different place now, and with the Current, I think part of the way we tried to adapt how we cover the court is in response to some of the criticisms that people had of the Enquirer Mirror when I was there doing it, and the way they did it, where we're trying, we're not going to report on every single minor offense that comes through the court. We're not going to report on, minor motor vehicle things like unlicensed operation, and that's quite, a huge number of cases in the court, and didn't feel that those were, necessary or worthy of coverage. So we're trying to cover things that are more significant, not necessarily, it's hard to sort of draw a line of where it is, but not necessarily that you start at a felony level. But I guess the way I tried to look at it is, behavior that is, or charges that represent, sort of a danger to the community, or are drug related, or are things that where harm to others is a possibility as a result of alleged conduct. We cover, and I think there's, I guess, and I think like some of the questions that you had sent me before, like in terms of what is the legitimate public interest in reporting on this? I think the justice system is a very much part of the public interest in knowing what happens and how, when charges are brought against someone, and following that through in terms of how the police conducted themselves, how the police operate, how the court handles those cases, and how our judges, because each judge has been very different in how they view certain types of behavior, certain types of charges, their interactions with the DA, their interactions with the police, and following cases through to the fruition where they're either, there's some sort of resolution in which there's a penalty associated with it, or they're dismissed or continued. So what else can I say? I guess that's it for now for that question. And I'm sorry, I don't know the history of like how long the Inquirer Mirror has done that in a certain manner, but I know this is very very similar to how many community newspapers and media outlets cover the courthouses in their geographic areas.
And I just want to point, I did want to make a brief point for the record. We did reach out to the Inquirer Mirror to join us today. They declined to come to the open meeting, but they did offer to meet with us in private to discuss this. So just as a point of information there. One other sort of ground rule question I think might be really helpful for everybody. What are there any specific legal restrictions or legal I guess parameters that impact how you report the news? Are there any things you must report or must not report? Like, what are the legal limitations or incentives for crime reporting?
Yeah, I mean, we're not reporting on juvenile cases. So juvenile court is a totally separate thing. We don't attend that and we don't report on it. And oftentimes when there are criminal cases that involve a minor, sometimes the thing that triggers those charges is sort of, newsworthy or noteworthy, or, we're reporting on the incident, but we are not reporting on the names of the individuals who are involved because they are minors. And those cases typically will go, for example, over the summer, Valero's truck was stolen, and the kids did like a police chase around the island. They were minors, so we reported on the incident that happened, and I think reported that the suspects were minors, and the case was being handled through the juvenile court system. We're not in other things, like we're not reporting victims' names who are associated with domestic violence cases, or generally victims' names in cases. And there's also best practices for reporting on those types of cases. So I'm trying to think what else. Typically we're not in the probate court either. I don't remember ever reporting on a probate matter.
Good, Ethelyn. It's a bit unnatural for me to be allowing you to talk on your meeting, but go ahead.
I just wanted to interject. Jason, for the sake of somebody coming back and listening to this, maybe not knowing what probate is, that is family court.
Yeah.
Right.
Family court.
Okay, so I just wanted to be able to say that.
Yeah, there's divorce proceedings and things like that.
Thank you.
Custody issues. Yep.
All right. So I think, this is an interesting starting point to discussions on this, which is that there are some limitations in some legal limitations on reporting, and then there's some ethical and moral restraints on it. I know that we have a couple of questions that we wanted to get up. I think it's probably best that we have this conversation in the spirit of building a consensus out of it, or just trying to learn more about the context in which reporting decisions are made. So with that in mind, does anyone have any questions that they'd like to open up with?
Jason, if you feel comfortable sharing, not who had criticisms, but what are some of the themes? Because you noted when you were at the Inky that people sometimes verbalize some criticisms that obviously, to me, when I see you guys doing something different at the current, maybe helped some changes happen. What were those criticisms, if you feel comfortable sharing those?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was along the lines of like, is it truly necessary to report on every minor motor vehicle? Like, do people really need to have their names in the newspaper because they, you know, didn't have their license, or they're driving unlicensed, or they had a suspended license, or a Mark Lane's violation, you know, whatever the chart. I mean, there's a whole number of them that, you know, the policy at the Inky was, you know, you get the list for the days in court, and everyone who's on the list goes in for, you know, into the report on what there was. So, you know, I tend to agree that like, um, I didn't feel like it was necessary to put in, to include every, you know, minor thing that goes to the courthouse. I don't necessarily feel like that, you know, adds any value, like, or, I mean, unless it's sort of a bigger trend of like, how does the court handle unlicensed operation, especially where we're in a community with many undocumented people and they don't have like something like that. But just to sort of do a one after another of, you know, those cases, I didn't feel was um, inappropriate. And I kind of agreed with the criticism of the Inky in that respect. So when we started the current, that was one of the things that we decided to do.
And that's sort of your question there, Ethelyn?
It did. Was there anything else
Yeah,
that
I
came
mean,
up as a theme?
you know, a lot of the things that we ran into at the Inky was like, they would put in people's like ages and addresses, and you know, I think where we've landed is that we'll put in the name and where they're like a resident of the Nantucket or a different town, but not their specific address. And, you know, part of that was, you know, so often people don't, you know, they move around a lot. There's a lot of renters. People are moving into different addresses, and then you get someone where someone was charged with something, and you put in the address, and they don't live there any longer. And the people who live there now are very upset because, you know, hey, this person doesn't live here. Why is my address in the newspaper? You know, so that, I think just by eliminating that, there's no need for it, and there's no, you know, and there's such a good possibility of getting it wrong, and not having someone's correct address or putting in the wrong address, that just eliminate that altogether.
Excellent. All right. Are there any other questions from board members? Feel free to raise your hand or just unmute yourself if you're curious. Go ahead, Veronica.
So, Jason, just to clarify that, do you see a trend in X amount of individuals driving without licenses, or a trend where maybe higher than average DWI? You would turn that more into a news story about aggregated, is that the right word, information, as opposed to reporting individual cases?
No, so sorry, I maybe mistook what I was saying. So we are attending court every week, and we are reporting on individual cases, but we're trying to leave out the ones that like are just basically minor motor vehicle offenses and things that are very sort of, I don't want to say inconsequential, but very minor. So we are reporting on the individual cases and following them through to resolution. But I think part of being there and sitting in court is also trying to pick out those larger trends and stories that, you know, if you see something like that, like, you know, trying to report on those sort of bigger picture than just the blow by blow, and following cases through to the resolution. So the community can understand how, you know, the judge and the district attorney's office and the defense counsel's work to bring certain types of offenses to a resolution. And, is that, is that right? Is it not? How does it compare to other, municipalities in Massachusetts? How does it compare to other states? So.
May I ask a clarifying follow-up of that?
Mhm.
So you would be reporting primarily on the context of, we lose somebody? You would be reporting on the context of, you would be attempting to contextualize a variety of individual crimes that do not themselves reach the standard of the public good.
If we, like, I'm just giving that as an example, like if we saw something that was worthy of like those other cases that we're not reporting on, like, is there a story there? Maybe there's not, but if there was, like, we wouldn't go back and sort of print all those names, but maybe just kind of monitor them to see if there's anything there. But we're not going to be sort of reporting on them week by week.
I gotcha. Go ahead, Amanda.
So I just have a question in terms of, does everyone take into effect the account this has on an individual? Just from like a mental health aspect, it could, by having their name in the paper, it could affect obviously their family, their job security, their mental health. And I just worry about, just from this standpoint of us wanting to be able to help people, like, is that going to prevent people from getting, seeking help that they need? By having their name out there, and it's like, then that person's labeled.
It may be easier to phrase this as, are there circumstances which would lead you to not publish a person's name, despite it potentially being in the public interest or it being noteworthy or newsworthy?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's hard to, I'd have to get, presented with what those circumstances are, but in general, I think, you try to, I think you try to sort of have a standard, and, you don't want to sort of, it's a slippery slope to say, well, we're going to do this one, but not this one and this one, so, what is worthy of leaving in versus leaving out? Are we going to print this person's name but not this one? And what is the reason? So I think it's, certainly maybe there would be a case where someone could convince me, but I just off the top of my head, I think it's just kind of, it's a tough thing to say, that there would be, I just think it would be hard to sort of do it fairly and do it equitably without running into problems down the line.
Okay. Go ahead. Well, Tara and then Athelin.
Thanks. Jason, just a quick question. Have you ever considered or thought about not publishing information until conviction versus charge?
Well, I think part of it is like the idea of like following it through, because so many of these cases, like I've sat in, and the evidence of it is overwhelming, and the person basically confesses to it, but they get it continued without a finding, which means they're not convicted, right? So I think part of that is like, again, it goes to like, there's so much gray area in here where the way our justice system works, it's, I think if you did that, there would be, you wouldn't be gathering the whole picture of what's happening on the island. You wouldn't be doing justice to reporting on the extent to which there are these offenses that happen and cases that move through the court system, that if you did it that way, because, I guess I have thought about it, but I've decided against it.
So can I just follow up just to say, so is it your thought or thinking that in the example that you just gave, that there was an overwhelming amount of evidence and then it was essentially led to no conviction, that you would then be the interpreter of the information, the overwhelming information, and therefore don't want to be put into that position? Or
I'm not sure what you mean.
so I'm saying like, basically, if there's all this information and then there's no conviction, and then so you were waiting until there actually was a conviction, and if there was not, would you feel like you would be sort of in a difficult position because of the fact that you had all this information and they weren't convicted? Do you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And you become judge and jury?
Yeah, I think that's part of it, but I just think that, um, yeah, for the reason I said, it's the justice system is, it's seeing it work every week is really eye-opening, and and I hope like part of that comes across in the court reporting. I mean, some people just kind of glaze over it, but there's a lot of intricacies to it, and I know some people just read it for the names and aren't sort of looking at the sort of nuances of how cases get resolved and what the circumstances are, and so yeah.
All right, go ahead, Athlon.
Well, first, I kind of want to comment on the thread that you guys are talking about, which I think what I'm hearing you say, Jason, is that it's an illumination of the process. If you really pay attention to what's happening in each case and follow it through, it has some things that will come forward if you follow it that are interesting about how the system works,
Sure.
is what I'm gathering from you, from what you said. I also understand that you're talking about the ethics of not picking and choosing, that you have to have a standard in some sense so that you're not treating anybody with favoritism or unequally in some way. Where if you thought about, well, yeah, this case, I heard you struggle with that, like maybe somebody would make a case to me, but I really feel like the ethics of this is if we're doing it, we have to do it the same way across. And I guess maybe I'm thinking about the ethics of the work I do too. There are different situations, but we still have to operate in the same way with everybody. And so I don't think I had really thought about that prior to this conversation. So I think that's helpful for us all to consider some of the challenges of that. I'm curious, my question is, I'm curious about, if you're willing to share this, about the process by which you continue as somebody in media and the people you work with. I'm sure this question comes up a lot around ethics. Like, how do we re-look at this? Do you find in your work that it is a focus of attention, that these conversations come up with the people you work with in how you're doing things often? Or is it something that you visit when you hear feedback?
I think it's both. I mean, I think, certainly we hear feedback from people. We hear from, victims of crimes and say, you know, some people are saying, they don't want a certain part of what was communicated reported, or they're thanking us for getting it out there, and they appreciate what that they didn't think that this would be sort of swept under the rug, and they're glad that it's being covered in some way, or they're concerned about a loved one for the reasons that you said, Amanda, about the impact of them on their on their mental health, or just their reputation, or whatever. They have a business and this is going to hurt their business, or things like that. So I think, in some ways it's like we want to try to take the judgment calls out of it and just say, like, here's the sort of standard, and we're trying to treat, like we said, everyone the same and do it the same way. But again, like there's so many variables in everything, every case, every story we do, and there's 1,000 judgment calls on everything. So yeah, I mean, it's inevitable part of the job, and you try to get as many of them right as you can, but sometimes you're not. And
Excellent.
that's not just court reporting, that's all reporting, so.
We're going to go with Sue in just a second. I do want to be mindful of Jason's time, and we're hitting about 30 minutes in. So I'd say about 5 to 10 more minutes, maybe 5 more minutes.
Yeah,
or
if I could,
so.
we're gonna take the kids out to dinner at 5:40, if that's okay.
So yeah, no, absolutely. So then let's go ahead and get Sue's question in. If there's a follow-up, and then we'll call it for Jason there. That's okay.
Well, first, I just want to thank you for being here and answering our bevy of questions. And one of the things you said I thought was really helpful in that not only are you writing about what's happening with the lives of the residents of Nantucket and the people here, but you're also watching the courts and, kind of holding them accountable for the work they're doing too. And I think that's really important, just societally. And I've noticed, I don't know if it's recent, that you've started adding some language about people are innocent until proven guilty. And I think that's another problem. I mean, I think it's great that you're writing that because people need the reminder. And I think it's a societal problem that people don't believe, they don't hold that. They don't read and hold things that way. But that's how our system is run. And so with that in mind, I'm wondering, when you report on something, when there's their first court appearance, and so the charges are in the paper, if you follow up on that, do you tag that article so that maybe if you did a Google search, the name would come up with, yes, the charges, but then the results? Is that a lot of work, or is that possible?
Going back to the original article and amending it?
Yeah.
No, we don't do that, but that's a good suggestion. Actually, I kind of like that. Something to think about, because I know it's with the online now, and the Google stain exists, and I think and both things will be there, because I do think it's important to follow things through to the resolution, and whether the person is convicted or they have some sort of resolution that's a continuance or things like that, a probation, or that it's important to follow it through to the end. But no, I think that's I can think about that. It's a good suggestion.
All right, we're going to do one last question from Athlon, and then we are going to let Jason take his kids out.
Just a quick comment. Jason, I think, Sue, that's a great idea. And Jason, if something like that happened, only because I understand the attention spans of people and how they miss things so easily, it would be amazing to have something like that where it almost looks like, how when you have a draft of something and it's literally over the whole piece draft, that it's something like that where it overlays the whole thing, that it was the finding. So it's super clear.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Almost like a stamp.
I know I've often seen those done
When
as
someone is arraigned.
Just whatever the conclusion is, that it goes back, and no matter what the conclusion is, that it's put on their original piece.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that if it's looked up and somebody sees it, they see that they were either dismissed, or they don't have to find that other piece or that trail.
Okay.
I've seen a lot of papers do it, not papers, I guess mostly blogs or webpage, online news, but they'll generally have the first paragraph have a bold updated by date, and then have the
Something like
updated
that.
information on it.
Mhm.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jason. We really do appreciate you making some time to come out and visit us. I think you've definitely given us all the kind of background we need to have a more informed discussion about this going forward. And then I think depending on what we do with the how things go with the Inquirer Mirror on this discussion, we may ask you to come back if you have time, just to sort of share things, or if anything changes in the future. But again, thank you very much for coming, Jason.
Thank
thanks
you
for-
so much, Jason.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and happy to come back and chat some more.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Okay, take care. Good night.
Bye-bye.
All right,
That's
guys.
great.
Yeah, I didn't want to, I figured if we just ran down the list of questions, it's going to come off like grilling, and I don't think that's what we wanted to be doing. And I honestly had a couple of insights through it. The discussion about the reporting on conviction, I think did kind of remind me that sometimes the most newsworthy stories about a court is when someone is not convicted, when they when other people in similar situations most likely would be. And that actually sort of complicated things in my head a little bit as well. I'm going to hand the reins back to Athelin. This is now your show again.
Very good. The next agenda item is FY 24 Contract Review Committee update. And I think Veronica is going to speak on that.
Okay, thank you. So this process, as far as the contract review committee, really is a year-round commitment, but the review of applications basically started in October. That the RFP is put out. Initially, it was just for the town human services grant. And the committee was told that there was $650,000 potentially available for all of the applicants. So the applicants, we received on that, I guess 14 applications. And of that, we awarded to 12. And the 2 that were not awarded under the contract review human services, the first one, we advised Addiction Solutions to withdraw their application and that there would be money available under the cannabis grant. And they would have, they also had only asked for $20,000 under the human services. And we basically advised that there was a, excuse my language, but a pot of money that was there for $175,000 and that they would be more appropriately applying in that area. So we took their $20,000 off. And the last one that we did not award was Habitat for Humanity had requested $20,000 for putting basically HVAC system in one of their houses. And, you know, although we can say it is a human services issue to have a safe and comfortable shelter, we didn't feel that it fell under the umbrella of what we do because this money is for the good of the greater community as opposed to just one family, and that there would be other avenues potentially that they could ask. So we did not award that, but we did meet, reviewed the applications. We met with every organization, and at the end, I can read off A Safe Place got $70,000, NAMI got $98,000 and change, rounding it up. Elder Services of Cape Cod, $21,000, Health Imperatives, $150,000, Fair Winds got $150,000. Martha's Vineyard Community Services, which we've requested if they could put Nantucket in that name, but you know, we gave them $17,000 for all that they do. South Coast Legal Services got $4,600. Interfaith Council, which is rental, fuel, and food pantry, $81,000. And Small Friends, $20,000. Artist Association, $20,000. And Sherburne Commons, which was a new concept or a new award for the Human Services Grant, got $17,000 and change for establishing a memory cafe. So that was the 650, how we awarded, and of that 650, you should be aware that it was over 800, almost 850,000 in requests. So we could not award 100% to everyone, and we tried to make it as equitable as possible after deliberations. So the next round was the cannabis.
Veronica, can I ask a
yes.
quick clarifying question? Because I just think it's important when you're stating these, that
Mhm.
we clarify that Martha's Vineyard is doing those services here on Nantucket.
Yes, exactly.
I just want to say that because I don't want any confusion from the community. Okay.
Right, it is just their name, and they basically are our special education and special needs support system, and they do great work on the island. But the name historically was Martha's Vineyard, and I know that when we met with them, we also said it would be nice if you could change the name, but you know, they do a whole lot more, not just on Nantucket. So thank you. So on to the current cannabis grant. So after that process was done, the cannabis grant, we were waiting for announcement of how much money was available there. That was $175,000, which is a portion of the sales, the tax money that is collected that is turned over for addiction prevention solutions, et cetera. And of that, we had 4 applications, and Health Imperatives, NAMI, Addiction Solutions, and Fairwinds all received money there. Fairwinds got $37,500. Addiction Solutions got $75,000. NAMI got $25,000, and Health Imperatives got $37,500 to add up to that $175,000. Just want to explain a little bit with Addiction Solutions, because they did receive the most of the request here. In the past year, their organization is growing, and their intention is to offer more clinic hours with that. Also to continue the work that they're doing in education, and also to help with building their administration. It's a relatively, I'm going to say a relatively new organization, although he's been doing work for a long time, but it's basically what we saw is their and I'm not going to find the right word here. I was going to say legitimizing their organization, because they've been a legitimate organization, but they now have a very robust board. And I think we're going to see them as very good partners in working on the island, and continue to work with the other organizations. So just wanted to say that. Where we stood, we had gotten to this point, and in some of our conversations, at the same time, there were issues that were coming up and made aware more globally through some of the publications. So, whether it was Nantucket Current or the Inky, and that, we definitely have a need on the island. Yes. Jason.
I'm sorry to intrude here. Athelin actually has to sneak out, so I wanted to break in there real quick and just let Athelin out.
Okay.
Apologies.
Okay. All right. So what basically came up in conversation is, the monies that we had already decided would be awarded are doing great things, and they will continue to do great things. But we basically said we're maybe not focusing on our younger population on the island. And we know that a whole bunch of statistics out there. We know that COVID did lots of horrible things, but we know that socially and emotionally, as educationally, the kids are catching up, because they were not in school programs for a period of COVID pandemic. we want to try to offer not necessarily treatment, but education, prevention, and intervention services. So the committee, basically, we talked and said we really should have this from age 0 to age 25. And the reason for 25 is, it covers after high school, whatever comes after that, for that period of time, whether it's college or transitioning into adulthood. And I also know that there are statistics out there that if an individual gets to age 25 and may not have addiction issues, that the statistics go way down, that it's very rarely that it develops after age 25. So we talked about it and decided that we were going to try to go and ask for more money. And asking for more money at this point is a very difficult thing, but I think we had enough of information behind of the reason for doing this. And so the request went first to FinCom, and FinCom was supportive, but they are the keepers of funds. And their request was that we try to hold off on this until the second annual town meeting in the fall, which will happen in November this year, which is unusual. And to basically go to the town at that point and ask for additional funds. So we're a little bit defeated maybe in that, but we took that as, okay, we will try to do that. And last week at the Board of Select, the Select Board, that asked for 175,000 additional monies for youth behavioral health grants was on the agenda. And Jason and Dorothy Hertz, who is the chair of the contract review, presented. And in discussion back and forth, initially it was, well, can we give you some money to do a needs assessment? And even before I think that Jericho or Dorothy or anyone in the audience could say, well, can we, the select board had their own conversation going back and forth and basically said, that's not a good idea. The problem is there. We need to dig in and do something now. And what they did is they basically said, yes, if the money has to be gotten, it has to be gotten from somewhere, and for us to proceed with this process. So we are going to meet next week, our first meeting of this. And the idea is that it will be different than the process for review will be pretty well the same what we went through with the contract review committee for awarding grants. However, our vision is that this will be a collaboration of organizations on the island, and basically for Fairwinds, Addiction Solutions, NAMI, and Health Imperatives, if through efforts we can develop programs where children are engaged, children are educated, they are, we come up with prevention, etc., that ultimately as adults, they'll have less clients to deal with. So in a nutshell, that's where this exists right now. It's going to be a lot of work, and we're going to dig in and we're going to make sure that this happens. That leads me to my next point here is right now, the Council of Human Services should have 2 people sitting on the contract review committee. And Tara, we miss you terribly on the board. However, it was discovered and reviewed by town council that the contract review committee is making recommendations for tax dollars. So the people that are on the board have to be voting members in Nantucket. So home ownership and paying taxes is wonderful, and we embrace everyone. But to sit on this board, you have to be a registered voter in Nantucket. So as we get ready to take on this next big step, we really want to have another member from Human Services on this. So I'm going to recommend, and I know Athelin has gone off, that if you have an interest, to either contact Jericho or Athelin Jericho, and hopefully we can get another member on. And what we're looking at, it's a time commitment. We're looking at potentially for the first, maybe next 2 months, it could be weekly or definitely meetings twice a month, or it could be weekly. We have also had multiple meetings in a week. So it is, it takes a commitment. Fortunately, we can do them via Zoom. So they are hybrid meetings. So that helps if people are traveling or are busy, that they can jump on if they, have some time when they're at work. So, all right. Anything else, Jericho?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping to sort of stretch out the process in the sense that instead of cramming 80 meetings in 3 weeks, we do them a little bit more spaced out. Due to the nature of the grant cycle and the various people involved, there is some kind of concentration in it, but there's some efficiencies that can be introduced through on a process level that hopefully will gradually get going on that front. But it is a time commitment. It involves a bit more time and a bit more work than most of the other boards that I participate in. Sue, you had your hand up?
Yeah, so I'm in this weird time where I'm not affiliated with an organization that would be applying.
Mhm.
So this might fit, but I am like, and it's probably a very short window.
I did see you kind of raise your hand, and then as we said, you were like, ooh.
Well,
yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out the timing in terms of like, because I know it is a commitment, like what the process is at this point. Like, I know, Jericho, you said you're like hoping to meet with the stakeholders as you develop the RFP, and then the RFP will go out. So like, I'm just wondering when the stop point is.
The plan for this cycle, the plan specifically for the youth grant is to have the projects up and running and the money distributable before or at the start of this coming year. Start of this coming school year, apologies. That was sort of the major impetus for taking it out of the special town meeting, is because special town meeting means it could be allocated no sooner than November. And then given the way things work, it would take, in my estimation, more time to get that money out and deployed. So it would end up being until, midway through to the end of the next year. The next CRC grant cycle starts in September, November, September, October. I believe there is one term expiring. I don't know if there's going to be any other changes in the board composition after that. But it would be a commitment at least through the summer and into the early fall for the current grant cycle. So we can assign somebody and unassign somebody. Should you start working again for somebody who is going to be submitting for it. So we can work around that if necessary. But I would suggest you just shoot me an email and then I'll try and get like a more discrete breakdown of what the cycle is.
Right. I mean, if there's someone on our board that can see it through for the next however many years, like I would totally defer to that, because I have every intention of applying for a grant
Yeah,
in the near future, but
yeah.
Mhm.
It might be, it would probably be helpful or useful for you to get an idea of the process, just so you see it from when you're applying, you see it from the other side.
well, I've been on that before, and I've actually watched pretty much all the meetings this year in my, spare time, just because I am fascinated. I think it's wonderful. And I can only guess how much work goes in, because all you can see is the meetings, but that's not doing the work beforehand, so.
The intention with this is that a organization will be formed out of this. At least this is the intention right now. And afterwards, there would be some money carved out of this for future grants, et cetera, because we know that if this, and now you also have to understand, this goes to town meeting, and this will get voted at town meeting. So that's why we have to have everything in place before May 6th, because at town meeting, then the general public either, will say nay or, thumbs up or thumbs down. So we need to have that done, but we also know that we can't go back and keep asking for more money and more money. And we know that there's federal grants out there that could be used for what we're talking about. So the intention is this year we get money from the town, additional monies from the town, and then moving on in fiscal year 25, 26 and on, that we can apply for federal grants to come in. So. And a question, Jericho, because we miss Tara on the board, and people can come and participate as members of the public. So, if Tara, if you are interested, we certainly would embrace your views and your input as a member of the public in this case.
Yeah, thanks. It's a good process. I mean, it's a great way to also learn so much about what all the organizations are doing. It's invaluable. You just learn so much. So I will participate as much as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that.
All right.
Are you sorted with your CRC presentation there, Veronica?
Yes. Yes.
Basically all of my updates were largely included in it was primarily CRC related stuff and youth grant related updates. We've had a couple of, we had our pretty consistent flat numbers in the COVID wastewater tests. It actually looks like and I'm quite surprised at this, it looks like we broke the normal spike in cases post vacation. For the last 2-3 years, it's been like clockwork with relatively consistent spikes after everyone. We had a spike after Christmas, and there hasn't been a methodology change, and we had honestly a statistical noise, right, like rattling around zero. So we're in better shape COVID wise than we've been since I took over this job. Still doing clinics. Next one should be scheduled for next month, probably later in the month. That program is going to continue out through June. So if you have anyone who does need a booster, or if you know any employers who have unboosted or unvaccinated J1s, I think you do need a vaccine to enter the country now. But if you need anyone who needs a boost, we're going to be doing the bivalence. We're hoping to crank some out for the J1s and H1B visas when they show up in April and May. And then last one will be in June. Other than that, a lot of behavioral health initiative stuff to work on. We should be launching that as a separate 501c shortly, as a kind of a what are we talking about? It was just in a branding meeting for that organization before I came on here, and it looks to be a sort of a backbone organization, sort of inspired by the Eagle Valley style of behavioral health alliance. So more news to come in that area. I don't think what else. That's mostly it. Yeah, go ahead, Sue. Do you have a question?
I have a question that's sort of bouncing around in my head, based on something Veronica said, which is about federal grants.
Mhm.
I've worked in a program that had federal grants, and it's a nightmare. And what I've thought a lot about doing it as a one-person show, trying to manage a couple of federal grants, is that I think there's people in the town who do, the town obviously takes advantage of different state and federal programs that are way more familiar with the kind of reporting and the portals that aren't in English that anyone understands. And I'm just wondering if there's a position possibility in the human services part of the town that could be the manager of grants. Because
So,
just to make it an efficiency, because one person trying to figure it all out 3 times a year, times however many grants the town gets, it's just not a good use of nonprofit money.
it is not. I am attempting to hire another person. I have I am a department of 1.5 to 1.7. I'm the only human service. I'm basically the only human services employee the town has. Anne is a combination of my business manager as well as the business manager for the senior services department. And most of my staff, I have 2 staff aside from Anne, who are full-time employees, but they work at the senior center for senior things only.
Right.
I am attempting to hire a part-time benefited position with the start of next year. I'm calling it a volunteer coordinator, but it's going to be someone to help me manage interacting with nonprofit organizations, collect grant opportunities and centralize them, and then help me with some online stuff that I just need more eyes on. It is something we're going on, but I have to be real honest. I do not see the town paying for a full-time employee with grant writing experience to then lease them out to other organizations. It doesn't seem, I think it makes it's a good idea, and I think it would be exactly the kind of expenditure that would benefit the public good by allowing, a variety of different degrees of oversight and degrees of awareness of where public money is going on the island. I just don't see us hiring someone with the necessary experience to do that role at a competitive rate. Because if you're capable of doing it for the town, you're capable of doing it for another organization that is going to, a solid grant writer makes a lot of money,
I'm not even saying writing the grant, it's just the managing of it. Like that's, and no nonprofit on Nantucket none of the small ones that I tend to deal with would ever afford anybody to do it, because it's such a small part of the job, except for the 3 times a year when it makes you want to
takes over everything else. Yeah, I know.
I mean, just ask ASAP, just ask them.
I mean, I've been riding shotgun on several grants that we're doing. We have the best grant in the world, which is this Rural Health Equity Initiative, which is just, does it have something to do with health? And that's all the reporting you really need to do is yes or no. That is way to the unusual side. I am hopefully going to be trying to expand the human services department into that kind of work, or at least coordinating across nonprofits and trying to leverage what resources we have in order to make that process easy. But it is very frustrating to work through and around procurement law for municipalities in Massachusetts. We had a Council of Aging got a couple of grants this past year, and administering those cost significantly more labor time than the total amount of the grants that we had, in no small part due to the inherent structure of a annual town meeting based, municipality. One thing that would really help would be, more flexibility on a governmental or governance level. So, that's something to keep an eye out if it's something you guys can see and find a way to impact on. But, it is a need that I can definitely see the town helping with. I just need to figure out a way to get it to happen, it's a complicated process.
Yeah.
And I want to, I just don't know that I'll be able to sell it. Go ahead, Tara, sorry.
Yeah, I would just say, even if it was somebody, because I find that if somebody just to vet what's available and say, here are these grants, this is what's available, and then bring it to the different organizations. Because I find that many nonprofits are just so overwhelmed with their day-to-day operations that they don't even have the time to go out and look to see what might be there. And then when you do try to look to see what's there, if you don't know what you're doing or how to do it, you just get, it's strangling, but that money is there. And that's why, I talk about this often. It kills you. I mean, I understand the process of the reporting is horrible. I used to deal with the federal grants in oncology at Sloan Kettering for years. But just having somebody who could say, this is where you need to look, or this might be appropriate for you, would just be so incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
And that actually is the part of the position, the part of that grant associate kind of, so one of the things I'm going to put into the job description for this particular employee is going to be managing a list of active grants and having it in a centralized location. We're trying to relaunch the network of care system with a little bit more. We have a network of care as a combination. It's the directory of all human services. We have a contract with an off-island company that does them all across the country. It was going to be my predecessor, Taylor Cardelli. Taylor Cardelli's goal was to successfully launch and manage the network of care website. Unfortunately, the contract on that was signed in February of 2020, and by March of 2020, Taylor was running around doing COVID stuff basically 24/7. I've started to have meetings with them where I was planning on launching it, and it is uncanny. Every single time I had a meeting with the contractor to revamp and launch that site, we had a massive spike of COVID immediately afterwards, like within a week in several circumstances. This time I've already had a bunch of meetings with them. There's no spike. I feel like my curse is broken. So when we relaunch it, I intend to have a bunch of resources on the network of care site specifically for providers, where we would be managing, maintaining, and updating a list of every grant opportunity that crosses either of our inboxes. And we would just sort of tag them and try and post them. And then if we had any sort of way to assist in filling out or assist in kind of managing them, kind of work on it from there.
Okay. Two things. First of all, Sue, I think that would be a great idea. And Tara, I think it's necessary if we could figure out a way of getting those services. Second thing is just wanted to, publicly thank Yeshi Pamo. Yeshi Pamo is retiring on March 31st. Yeshi Pamo has been the manager of our food pantry for the past number of years. An incredible amount of food is distributed to hundreds of Nantucket residents, families over the course of a week. And we're going to miss her terribly. And I'm sure that, Yeshi is not watching this at the moment because you should be at the food pantry still, or at least locking the door right now. But volunteers, if they're available on Monday afternoon at 5 o'clock, we have a food delivery coming in, and it's a time that we don't have clients there, but we have some volunteers coming just to wish her well in her retirement. And if anyone would like to either send her a message or whatever, you can do it through me. I'm organizing some way to just say thank you for the work that she's done. And hopefully, I know there have been advertising for some new positions, and hopefully we have people in place soon, because the work has to continue. There's a good solid group of volunteers, and volunteers are always coming in, and we're going to continue to need volunteers there. So hopefully it'll be a seamless transition. But I just wanted to say thank you to Yeshi Pomo publicly for that. And the second thing is, we talked about having the other Jason attend potentially our next meeting from Fairwind. So Jason Bridges, to talk about the initiative that started on, I guess it was January 1st, to give us an update with the behavioral health initiative.
That's
I
actually
don't
been,
remember the exact name at the moment of that.
so that's the one that's still in flux. The working name right now is the Nantucket Behavioral Health Initiative.
Right.
And we got that started January of, that was an outgrowth of, Sue, you'll remember the GPS GAPS study. That was the final recommendation of the GAPS study, was putting together a collaborative organization to work on these together. The final output of that collaborative process will be the launch of where we were floating around everything from community solutions to behavioral health or island. So we had a couple of names for it, but it'll be fully launched publicly. But we've been meeting on that on a weekly or bi-weekly basis since November of 2021, I want to say. It's when I started going to the meetings regularly.
I was
Back when-
wondering, Veronica, if you meant that or if you meant the new CBHC.
Yes, that's what I
The
was
CBHC,
referring to.
yeah, that's
So,
correct. Thank
yes.
you.
There's
Yeah.
so much going on, so much.
Yeah, that they took over crisis on the first, and then, yeah, I think it would be, probably getting Jason in to talk about that, or Amanda, who is the person that phone rings to. So either one of them can make
Okay.
that presentation.
But if we can get an update on that, that would, we talked about that last month's meeting, and just to keep that we have that as our guest speaker for next month. Okay.
All right. Any other questions for me? Now, it's a little weird because we do not have a quorum, so we cannot end this meeting. So what's
Stay
going to
on
happen
this
is,
call forever.
what's going to happen is I am going to end this for everybody, and then please, everybody, remind me of this as well. I'm going to try and remember it. But at the beginning of next meeting, the first thing we do when we have a quorum is we vote to end the
Close this,
previous
yeah.
meeting.
Close this meeting and then start the new one.
I was gonna
Yeah.
say, start drafting the agenda so that it's just, you put it on there right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
exactly.
No, we'll get
And I
that sorted
believe
out.
our next meeting is the 20th of April. I think Anne sent that out in a message today. So at 4 o'clock on the 20th.
And I am going to be trying to keep it to that third Thursday between 4 and 5. Obviously, if we have a special event, or if we don't, if most people cannot make it, then we will be flexible. But it seems like it's best bet to have a day in advance every month and then vary from that if we need to.
Very good. Thank you.
Read.
Great.
All right, guys. This is not the end of the meeting. Bye-bye.
Nope.
Okay, goodbye.